On this episode of the John1911 Podcast, SIG Shake-Away Technology, Armory construction continues, the Larry Vickers plea, and dude, where's my Gimp mask? Okay, good evening everybody. Today is Thursday, November the 2nd, and this is episode 320 of the John1911 Podcast. It has been a little bit since I've done a podcast. Those of you who have been following us for a long time, we did warn you that we are going through some significant upgrades to the range and the business. Primarily, we have gotten rid of the old Armory and are in the process of building a new Armory. So right now, John1911 is kind of like a cross between, I don't know, pirate ship and a bunch of gypsies running around. So the current state of the business is the reference collection is being stored in an undisclosed location. It took 3 full days to move the firearms reference collection. It has obviously grown in the 3 years since when we moved into the new Armory then. But you know, you get offers that you can't refuse, and you know, you do what you have to do. So, long term, even though I want to apologize, even though, you know, we have kind of really, our production schedule and our content routine has really suffered, I am confident, well, I'm more than confident, I'm 100% positive that that going forward, this will actually really help us produce a lot more interesting content, you know, higher levels of content, much more frequent content. In particular, podcasting, we'll probably be able to go to possibly 2 a week, maybe even sometimes 3 a week podcast, if that's what you want to hear. So, you know, sacrifices now for benefits later. So, I guess the first thing is I just want to go ahead and say, as a personal note, since it's November the 2nd and we just went through the Halloween holiday, I came to a realization, you know, because Elvira, she shows up every Halloween, and it just kind of occurred to me because I was looking at something for Dolly Parton, and is Elvira just really Dolly Parton dressed up for Halloween? Or is Elvira like a goth Dolly Parton or a emo Dolly Parton? I don't know. Like, you know, inquiring minds want to know. All I know is it seems like Dolly Parton has aged since when I saw her in a movie with was it, I can't remember the other two actresses, and was it 9 to 5? Was that the movie? It's my the older listeners in the crowd will have to you know, refresh all of our memories. And Elvira doesn't seem like she's aged either. So what else is there going on? I guess I need to say this. I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate that this has happened while we were kind of on our little mini hiatus. But obviously, like many of you, we have seen the Larry Vickers pleadings for how things were handled with the with his FFL, his SOT, getting post-dealer samples, and sanctions. And sanctions in particular would involve Russia. Looking back at the pleadings, it does appear that this has been going on with Larry since 2015. So I haven't gone back to check this, but I remember, you know, we all knew this, like Larry went and did a bunch of videos in Russia, and I don't remember if this was before or after their first moves in Ukraine. So I mean, he went over there and he did videos with some of their special forces. I don't want to say Spetsnaz because I don't even know who the hell. You know, I think Spetsnaz, as far as Americans are concerned, is just a generic special forces term. Like, I don't really think people really know what that is. Remember that he had done a video with some special forces group, and they were doing, like, I would call them confidence drills. Like, they were shooting guns, pistols past each other. And there was even in one of the videos one of the Spetsnaz guys even torched under a stress fire situation, put a round into the dirt, and it was captured. It was an ND basically, and it was captured on film. I have to go check YouTube, but it seems that when Larry was in Russia talking to Russians, he was also talking to them about, somehow getting involved in business with the Kalashnikov concern, because Kalashnikov was wanting to set up some stuff here in the U.S. And when Obama put the sanctions on the Russians, that's why we can't get any more Russian shit here. He was still talking to him, and so he was apparently in violation of these sanctions. Either trying to get parts or. The problem with the sanctions, I think a lot of people don't really understand. It's not just guns. It is, what would the phrase be? The beneficial, doing business with the beneficial owner. I think it'd be the best way I can put it. So we actually had a similar situation, not unlike what Larry Vickers was dealing with Kalashnikov concern, but it was dealing with Blaser rifles. And so, I realize most of you who listen to this podcast do not care about Blaser rifles. I shoot Blasers. I like them. But, things are much better now, especially by JSIP and Son, with with the stuff that they do, barrels, and there's aftermarket things. GRS does the chassis systems, but in 2015, in 2016, things were pretty lean here in the U.S. But what you could find is overseas, in particular in Russia, and in some of the former, I guess, Soviet Union. I definitely want to say Warsaw Pact to be safe. You could find these dudes who were gun guys, and they either had access to machine shops or they were machinists themselves or technical people, and they would be willing to do things and make things and try things that would never fly in the U.S. because there's not enough of a market for it. But over there, it was so cheap, it was very compelling to talk to these people. And we were in the process of, I guess technically the government would call it a technology transfer, with entities in Russia to bring Russian-made Blaser accessories into the U.S. And, when the sanctions hit, we had to shut it all down. And, we were talking to various people, and they were trying to find ways to get around the sanctions. Like, we're not on the sanctions list. Like, no, well, you're in Russia. And, it was, some of them tried to set up some entities in like third-party countries that were in the EU. And the problem is you're still dealing with individuals who are essentially Russian or Russian-owned companies. And, even if you're moving a product from, at the time, from Russia to one of the Baltic states, it's still stuff coming out of Russia, and you're violating sanctions. And so, these guys were trying to bend over backwards to try to come up with ways to do stuff. Because, frankly, they were very thirsty for the American dollar. And, God bless them for that. But, we just, we had to shut that shit down. It was like, there is no way, because the problem was if they send us something and, it gets through, shit gets through all the time. Well, it's later on when stuff's being audited or being checked that you start having problems. So, don't put anything on your import license that you're going to have to defend later. I think that would be a good way to put it. And so, getting back to Larry, I'm not even going to get into the whole thing with Larry as far as, the righteousness of the prosecution. I mean, I'm certainly sympathetic to Larry's situation, and we all know that the deep state federal government uses international crises to somehow, no matter what happens, they try to find ways to somehow hurt the American gun owner or gun businesses or the gun community. So up until COVID, I mean, even before COVID, you can buy all kinds of shit from China. Made, half the stuff I'm recording on right now was made in China, but we can't get Norinco made guns. What the hell difference does that make? It's because of the Tiananmen Square situation. And, I was alive during Tiananmen Square. And Tiananmen Square in the U.S. still didn't even get a whole lot of press. Like, people didn't really understand how bad it was. And in China, they really suppress it. But anyway, getting back to Larry, you get in these situations where, there. Here, this is not going to make any logical sense, but I'm going to go ahead and say this. I cannot convey to most of you 20 years ago how significant Larry Vickers was to the 1911 community. I believe Larry Vickers, I believe he retired in 2003 from what we call Delta Force. And while he was in Delta Force, he was making custom 1911s. And he was kind of introduced to the gun world and a 1911 community, I think by Ken Hackathorn. It was coming out like, hey, this guy, Larry Vickers, he's active duty and he's making these custom guns and they're really worth checking out. And this idea that you could get guns from this active duty, Delta guy. And, at the time, there was some confusion. People were thinking Larry made guns for Delta and was, so like he could make one gun for Delta, another gun for like John 1911. And like you could get like the closest thing you could get, to legendary combat proven 1911 used by what is considered by one of the most elite units in the world at a time when the world is being swamped by striker-fired Wonder 9 pistols. Like, I just can't convey to the average gun person today how big Larry Vickers was to the the 1911, not that small community, but how big Larry Vickers was to the 1911 community. And so, Larry is a high-end gun dealer or gun collector. Probably, I think he has an SOT, special occupational tax, so he can modify guns. He swims in a deep end of the pool, and he gets a lot of things. And if you read the paperwork, it's obvious Larry was good at playing the game. Dealer samples, the whole dealer sample thing, and post 86 machine guns, and even in the indictments, there was a gun that caught my attention. I don't think anyone's real. I've been busy dealing with range construction, so I don't know what y'all are talking about on the gun forums, but I wonder if this has come up. So if it has, I apologize. I'm just creating this in my own mind. I remember a couple years ago, there's a guy we all know. His name is Ian McCollum, and Ian is the Francophile. He's another one of these, started from the bottom. Now he's here, gun tuber people, and he loves French stuff. And Larry Vickers had a FAMAS rifle and a semi-automatic, one of the rare ones. We've documented these guns. I've always wanted one, but I just can't. I mean, they're more expensive than a transferable M16. It's just crazy. So anyway, Ian McCollum turned up with a semi-automatic FAMAS rifle. And, it was a big deal for him, and he did videos on. Everyone was so happy for him. And it turns out, if I remember correctly, he bought this gun from Larry Vickers. And bought it from, Larry Vickers' collection. And I don't know, might have been maybe 2015, 2016. I don't know. It's been some years. But, it was kind of a big deal. And it's like, well, why would Larry give up here's his phrase, a moon rock gun for that he's never going to be able to replace, because being able to replace a semi-automatic FAMAS rifle, I think some estimates there might be 200 of them. I doubt there's 200 of them in the U.S. I could be wrong. I would doubt there's 100. Well, Larry, on one of his Vickers Tactical YouTube channels, he popped up with a fully automatic FAMAS rifle. So he obviously got a post-dealer, FAMAS rifle. And so some, cool, they're out there. I mean, I'm sure I don't really know that much about what's floating out there in post-dealer guns. I've seen quite a few when I'm dealing with, FFLs for having stuff worked on and some higher-end FFLs. Well, if you go through this federal government paperwork, turns out one of the guns that they were able to get a law letter for, they have it brought into the country by these little podunk police departments. And I'm not disrespecting. I love podunk police departments. We do business with podunk police departments all the time, not just the giant SWAT teams. But, they somehow signed a law letter to get a fully automatic FAMAS rifle, and it turns out that like this police department apparently doesn't even have a tactical team. Like it's might be 7 dudes or something, which, for a small town, that's a lot, to be able to crew, for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, I mean, it's hard to do. So, and it's apparently Larry, they fudged, it's not alleged, he pled guilty, but stuff like this, they were getting these guns. They were getting the law letters to do these post-dealer samples, for law enforcement use, and they were never actually using them for law enforcement. They were never demoing, apparently, for law enforcement use, and they were immediately either putting them in their private collections or selling them amongst other FFLs, and that's a big no-no. We had somebody come in. I wish I could remember your name. You came in on our website and you called the law letters the liar's letter. And I thought that was interesting. So I don't know what did Larry in exactly. Was it the kind of the play the game law letters that I think a lot of people probably play, or was it the sanctions thing? In my opinion, I think the sanctions thing is probably what got him on the radar. Incidentally, we actually had a police chief around here, a police chief and 2 FFLs. I think one was in Ohio, another one was in Kentucky or in Indiana, maybe both in Indiana, but the police chief, he was a police chief maybe in a small town in just west of the city of Cincinnati. I'm not going to name the town because most of you wouldn't know the town anyway. If you've heard of Cincinnati because of the sports teams. So in the greater Cincinnati area, and they were doing apparently the same thing, and they were getting, oh my God, it was like 20, 30 guns, I think there were M2s, like it was all kinds of crazy horse shit. And they were just not doing these demos and turning around and selling them to other FFLs as post-dealer samples that, guns, if they are brought, without getting into too much into it, if they're brought in as, for law letters, for demoing, if a police department's interested in doing something with it, whether the police department does order a bunch of guns or does not order a bunch of those guns, that post-dealer sample sits on that FFL's books. And so it's part of his controlled inventory, and he can sell it or trade it to other FFLs, and or if he goes out of business, gives up his license, other FFLs can buy that stuff. It is an asset. It's not transferable to schmoes like you and me, but it is transferable to people with FFLs. A perfect example of this, if you go to Las Vegas or any of these big cities and they have the machine gun shoots, and they're buying machine guns and they're shooting them and they're breaking them and they're replacing them, all of those machine guns are dealer sample machine guns, because they're not going to rag out something that's transferable, that can't be brought in anymore, that can be sold to you and me. They can pay, instead of paying $40,000 for an M16, they can pay $3,000 from Colt and have one. I don't know what the prices are now, but that's probably about right. And they can rag it out and break stuff on it. Doesn't hurt the value. Whereas a transferable gun that there's no more can be brought in if it's not all original, if it's not, if it's shot to shit or parts replaced on it, the value of it goes down. So this is a known space. And so I don't know. Larry's playing the game, and unfortunately the question is now, what happens? I mean, I don't know. Like, Larry's I don't talk to Larry Vickers. I haven't talked to him in years. I used to communicate with him, and as far as I can tell, he should be under disability. But I'm seeing stuff on the internet where he is supposedly planning classes. I don't know how he can do that if he's under disability. I don't understand. And there's a lot of questions here. Like, is Larry out of the business? Is he out of the game? I don't know. Is Larry sick? Like, remember, Larry did have cancer. Like, we don't know. And it was a big story. And, I feel really bad for Larry, because Larry's one of those guys, for me personally, in the industry that I actually do care about. Like, he's, when you're younger and you're impressionable and you look at someone like Larry, you just think he's a god. And, like, wow, this guy, wow, this is amazing. This person, like, just to even be able to, talk to this person or hear what this person has to say, it kind of reminds me of the scene at the end of the movie of they're talking about the 1919 Black Sox scandal when Shoeless Joe Jackson's walking out of the court and the little kid goes, "Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so." In other industry news I thought was worth sharing, there is a story coming out of Southern California, and I hate to be the person dogpiling on a SIG P320. I was never that down on the SIG P320. Officer Mike really was, and I think time is bearing out to prove him to be right. I don't remember the name of the range. It's in Southern California. I believe it's in Southern California. It's probably a U.S. PSA affiliated property, and the word that's been going around, and there's been various people talking about it, is there have been a number of negligent discharge is not the correct way to say it. There's been a number of incidents with SIG P320s, and I guess they had one. The claim is there's been a number of them where they have discharged in holsters. It's like, did they not? We didn't see it. I know we could rehash all this again. Well, apparently they had an incident, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and gun discharged in a holster and apparently winged the shooter, probably, cut him in his foot or something. My understanding is it didn't do catastrophic damage, but it definitely clipped him. And so this particular property came out, and they've done the same thing that happened where I worked before, where they were banning Black Hawk, the Serpa holsters. They were making people sign waivers specifically if you're going to bring that gun on the property. But right now, the word is that this particular range has, quote, banning SIG P320s that do not have thumb safeties. They're not to be used on property, not to be used in matches, and there's no exception. I guess the thing that put him over the edge was the person being injured. The most dangerous thing many people will ever do is holstering a gun, and anytime a firearm around a holster, either putting it in or taking out of a holster is it can be extremely dangerous. And if you're a SIG P320 person and you want to defend this gun and you're like, all this has been beat back, all this has, been disproven or disqualified or whatever. I mean, not all of it. There's still, some of it's still being litigated actually with some of the police departments. And Glock went through some similar stuff, but they did beat it. One thing you have to acknowledge is, legally speaking, and this goes with the Serpa holster, how things happen. What happens is, now that somebody's been hurt, there's a chance someone could sue. And even if it's not the range's fault, it's the person who had the gun, handled the gun, mishandled the gun. Maybe they didn't have the right equipment. But the reality is, once somebody's hurt and lawyers are involved and there's insurance and liability and compensation and people are looking to get paid, shit can go sideways quick. And the first, very quickly in interrogatories or under deposition is going to be, so director, owner, person who represents this gun range, can you tell me what you've heard about the reputation of the SIG P320? Can you tell me, let's go through your emails. Did you guys ever talk about a 320? Oh, did you have other people had accidents with 320s? Well, why didn't, if you're having these conversations, why didn't you ban this gun from your range? As a matter of fact, I could make an argument, Mr. Range Owner, that the fact that you didn't ban this gun, you condoned the gun. And my poor client, who looks up to you to be the expert, never said his 320 was a piece of shit. And so it's your fault. And end scene. But you see kind of how this can happen. And so the worm is turning on the reputation on a 320. It's not set in stone. We'll see what happens. Glock beat a lot of this. It turns out a lot of it wasn't true. Some of these guns going off in holsters is pretty compelling. I think fundamentally the problem with the SIG 320 is, if it's a problem, is that it's actually a single action gun. The thing is with the Glocks, as most people don't realize this, is a Glock is actually a double action gun. The striker is only partially cocked. So when you pull the trigger, it actually pulls the striker back the rest of the way so it can go off. It's not a hair trigger. It's not an easily tripped trigger. Where the 320 is fully cocked, and without a thumb safety, it can probably go off. They have decent triggers on them, so they can go off pretty easily. This does beg the question, do other guns have this problem? Single action striker fired guns. For example, the HK VP9 is definitely a single action gun. And I don't know, does the VP9 go off in holsters, or does the VP9 suffer from the same accusations that the SIG P320 suffers from? Yeah, if yes, why? If not, why not? It could be a situation where it's strictly volume. You've got, since the 320 has gone mainstream to become the service pistol that now all the police departments are going to start using and the military are using, and government agents are going to want to use this gun possibly. It's just a numbers game. Whereas, the one random dude that has a single action gun with no external safeties to go off is an H&K in the corner of some, range somewhere you never heard of. You've got probably thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people every weekend now rocking these 320s, and it's just a numbers game. It could just be it just could be a mathematical quotient that's causing this stuff to make the headlines. But irrespective of whether that's true or not true, when people are looking to play hot potato with the liability and they start asking, what did you know and when did you know it, Mr. Range Owner? Yeah, I got bad news for you. These 320s, I don't know what SIG's going to have to do. I don't know what it's going to take, but SIG is not going to be able to stop ranges from just flat out basically banning this fucking gun. Until they can figure out, to quote Donald Trump, what the hell is going on. They're not going to be able to stop it. Just like SERPA, they can't stop, they couldn't stop people banning the SERPA holsters. No one ever got sued banning a SERPA holster from their property. And you're not going to be able to sue someone from banning a SIG P320 from their property. And the stink is back. And we'll just have to see what happens. Oh, one more thing. I saw a comment talking about the issues with the SIG 320 discharges, and they referred to it as the SIG shake-awake technology. It's fucking hilarious. In other industry news, it's kind of an update of a project we have on the back burner. We've been so busy this year. 2023 has just been a hell of a year. we picked up a French FRF2 rifle. I guess that was this year. Could have been last year. You haven't really seen anything of it because we haven't been able to do a whole lot because we've been so busy. But, shortly thereafter, Scrome, I can't, Alexinox or I can't remember what they're called, but the Scrome brand. The company in France that made the original scopes for the French FRF1 and FRF2 sniper rifles is going to reproduce to military specifications the scopes, and they're about they were about $3,000, about 3,000 euros, or 30, maybe it's 32, 36. I can't remember exactly how much it was in US dollars, but it wasn't. I'll tell you what, if you think about what it cost, because, we're precision rifle shooters over here, and glass is expensive. And, around $3,000 for high-end glass, in today's, that's the beginning. You can go way higher than that. And it's like, man, that seems like a good deal. You get scope mounts, you get box, you get papers, you get the accessories, and it's all factory original. And so anyway, Scrome, we'll call them Scrome, they wanted a 50% deposit earlier in the year. And as of October 31st of 2023, the last of the 50%, the second 50% of the deposit is due. We sent our wire in on the 26th. It seemed like it was delayed. We reached out to our contact in France. They said it takes about a week for the stuff to clear. We have had a number of people reach out to us who are claiming they're having a hard time sending money to Scrome. Scrome did tell us that, the October 31st deadline, that's their public hard deadline, but the reality is they're not going to be dicks about it. And so we have gathered a couple names of people who are looking for some clarification, whether they're either how to send money or if their money went through and they're still on the list to get their scope. Because at this point, most of them have already paid 50% of it. So if you're one of those people and you need to get a hold of somebody in France and you're having a hard time doing it, feel free to drop us an email, podcast@John1911.com, and we will go ahead and reach out to them and help you get you squared away, because we have to make sure we're squared away too. Might as well, help you guys out. Oh, by the way, y'all see that video on the Avidity Arms PD10? The Snake Eyes video? That was fun. We're not gear reviewers. We reached out to, if you haven't heard of this, you haven't heard of this because we haven't done a podcast in like 3 weeks. We reached out to Avidity Arms. If you're like, who the hell's Avidity Arms? The answer is the Rob Pincus gun company. That may not be technically true, but that would be how most of you would know who it is. And they make this little single stack, striker fired, full grip, little pocket gun, but it's got a full grip. And, I have large-ish type hands. And so I was out shooting it just for shots, just trying to get, kind of get used to it. We weren't filming it, and literally created a snake eyes event where the brass goes up in the air, turns around, and goes back into the chamber and tries to load into the tents. We call it snake eyes. It's like, two pieces of brass go into one chamber. It's exceedingly rare. It's like catching a lightning bolt on a camera, on film. And so we had one of these, and there's more to come on the PD10. Just stay tuned. Speaking of, I guess, industry news. So there's a video that we saw on the internet. It's where we see videos, and Ken Hackathorn was shooting, I guess, I don't know if it's the Flet C certification or it was the Air Marshal, but he was shooting the first, apparently it was the first string of this Air Marshal qualification, and he was talking about, different ways to draw and, advantages and disadvantages. And it was in a pretty interesting little video, because I'm always looking for drills to shoot. And he made a reference to the AIWB appendix holster position, and I think he begrudgingly acknowledged that it is fast, and so it will help you on making a time standard. But he called the position the junk position, or he called it the holster. If you're an AIW holster, you're keeping it in the junk position. And I just, that one I thought was funny, as opposed to, these guys that get all crazy, crazy upset on the internet. You're going to shoot your dick off. It's like, whatever, just shut up. If you're the kind of person that's going to shoot yourself, you're going to shoot yourself. Think about maybe using a gun with that external safety. That certainly would come in handy. Or maybe if you're a Glock person and you're AIWB and you're doing it all the time, I would look into a striker control device, or maybe the Thing. I don't know if that's still a thing, but I think that's definitely worth looking into, especially if you are someone who carries, like me, in the junk position. I guess we can't, go into, we've missed 3 weeks of podcast. And so I do want to say a few things about a few things. But I'm not going to do a 2-hour podcast. This is just a solo episode. The first thing is, obviously all the fighting that's going on in Israel and Gaza right now, and, stuff going on up in the border with, Hezbollah. Obviously, if you don't know, I'm siding with the Israelis. It's one of those things where if the Israelis stop shooting and gave up their guns, the war would continue, because Hamas would keep doing what they're doing. If Hamas gave up their guns and stopped, shooting at people or doing what they're doing, the war would end, because Israel doesn't want any part of this. I think a lot of this quest to try to make what's going on in Hamas's behavior, to justify Hamas's behavior, I think is long-term not going to be a good thing. I think, I think that this kind of does remind me of how you'll see people who took positions maybe about Nazi Germany in 1940 and 1939, and maybe in the spring of 1941, and long term it may have hurt them. Charles Lindbergh comes to mind. That Charles Lindbergh, that guy, he just liked the Nazis because they had fucking cool airplanes. And he liked, he was like, they're sciencey and technology, whatever. And it's like, he really looked like an ass. And Roosevelt never forgave him for it. How he basically was pro Nazi Germany until December 7th. I think a lot of these people, I just can't help but think a lot of these people who are doing this are the same people that get on the internet and they say things like, do you remember all the people that got on the internet and they said free Britney? And I know this seems like, what does Britney Spears have to do with the war with Hamas and Israel and Hezbollah in the Middle East? It doesn't. But I'm talking about the media, and I'm talking about media narratives in the U.S. That's what I'm really talking about. How many people, news outlets, pundits, average folks were like, free Britney? Britney's being enslaved by her family or being abused and all this and that. And, they went out and they started all this shit, and they, accused all these people of all this stuff. And I'm not saying that the people that were in Britney's life, it was all, rainbows and sunshine. But, Britney got freed. And then look at what's happened to Britney Spears since then, and the craziness that has gone on. That woman is obviously mentally ill, obviously needs to be under some kind of community control. It's always been clear, but the people that advocated the positions to, let her be in the situation that she's in now, those people are never held accountable for their positions. And, I kind of feel like this is a situation, and we're with kind of what's going on with Hamas. For example, I'm just gonna make this point. So there was an attack by Islamic militants. You could call them freedom fighters if you want. I'm not saying that. But these Islamic militants, they attacked this concert venue and killed a bunch of people and caused a lot of damage and a lot of strife. And do you remember when the world just kind of called it a cycle of violence? Do you remember that? Oh, wait. You think I'm talking about the attack at the rave in Israel on October the 7th? No, I'm talking about the people that blew a bunch of shit up and killed a bunch of people at the Ariana Grande concert, like in Belgium or something. Nobody said that was, it's a cycle of violence and, all this. The world was horrified and this was terrible. And all the shit that went on in that theater and around that area, okay, that was unacceptable. But it happens to a bunch of people in Israel that, by the way, all those people at that rave, those are not like Orthodox or Hasidic, which are two different things, Orthodox or Hasidic Jews. Those were they look pretty secular to me. They look pretty liberal to me. I would say most of the people, they were young and probably politically left. And, a lot of them were probably even would be against, going into Gaza. And they all got gunned down, blown up, and all kinds of crazy shit. And it's just like, but it's like, what's the difference here? Is it because they're Jews? I don't know. They weren't a bunch of Jews at the Ariana Grande concert. I don't know. This is this kind of stuff I think about. And, I try to look at things in patterns because it's just the way my mind works. And, I go, well, if it's true for this, is it true for that? If it's true for this, is it true for that? It's one of those things where I try to find moral clarity. I've talked about this before. One of the things I think, and whether we're talking international terrorism or we're talking office politics or whether we're talking leadership in the military or we're talking, most things in life, you need to have a code and you need to have a moral compass to guide your decisions, because it's easy to get on the internet and to be like, well, obviously, we would be for this and not be for that because it's so right and wrong, or it's black and white. I would never do this. I would never make that decision to end up in a shooting, to end up in jail, or to have, be indicted by the prosecutor. Well, no kidding. It's where the compass comes in handy. And where you really need it, it's not deciding between the good decision and the bad decision. It's deciding between two bad decisions. It's deciding between two seemingly sucky choices. And you're going to have to be able to look inside of your heart or your soul to be able to live, not only to be able to be like, well, we got to go this way. Not only to be able to live with that decision legally or morally, but you're going to have to be able to justify that. You may have to be able to justify that decision to the world. And you also are going to have to be able to look yourself in the mirror when you're, when there's no one else around, and you're going to be able to be like, yeah, no one agrees with me, or they weren't there. We did the best we could. This is why we decided to do what to do. This is why we decided to support these people and not these people. And, it's times like this when I think morality and ethics really come into play, and we don't really teach that anymore. Even in college, they call it logic class. It used to be called morality and ethics, and that would open up a whole other can of worms for a podcast that we're not going to do, because we're primarily a gun firearms podcast. But I think some people would benefit from a little bit of humility and maybe some maybe take a class on morality and ethics. And if you don't think you can teach morality and ethics, or you don't believe in, like, well, your ethics are not my ethics, well, that's fine. But maybe we don't live in the same culture, and maybe we shouldn't be near each other. Maybe you should go live someplace else, because you can have, if we don't have morality and ethics, these common themes and standards that hold us together as a community, we don't have a community. You end up with something like Beirut in Lebanon, which was a disaster. So that's kind of where I'm at with a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East right now. And in other news, I thought it was, I saw this and I was like, wow, that's interesting. I like the UFC. I really like Dana White. I don't watch every UFC fight. I am a old retired martial artist. I was never a UFC fighter. And I guess there was a report that, let's see here. Hold on, as it go. I guess, is it Budweiser basically the Bud Light people have signed maybe a 10-year deal with the UFC. They're sponsors for the UFC. And I guess there were a lot of people they're all up in arms about, Bud Light or Budweiser or whatever, however you say, whoever they are, AB InBev, whatever it is, sponsoring UFC. And it's probably a big fat check, for Dana White to do that. But, it's like, okay, it's like, well, we boycotting UFC now? Are we boycotting, we're going to all be up in arms about this? And it's like, okay, I certainly can see that. But I just have a question, and it's just kind of in my head. When Bud Light did what they did with the girl that's not a girl, who actually, if you look at that person objectively outside of the framing of, the whole trans beer can bullshit thing, legitimately seems like kind of a decent person. And that was obviously, that decision was so stupid. And they got hammered for it, and they paid a price. But then after that, I remember there were stories about Bud Light was sponsoring, gay pride festivals and all these other things. And it was getting reported in the media, like Breitbart and these other places, Fox News. Bud Light's not getting the message. When everyone's like, "Roar, keep going after him." Roar. It's like, okay. I mean, like, that's true. Like, they're not getting the message. Because, they did the trans person can thing, and then they're still doing the gay pride festivals places, and, they're doing other stupid shit, which, whatever. Okay, keep digging. So, along that argument and that scale, at what point is signing a giant contract, probably for 10 years with UFC, not getting the message? That's what you wanted, right? I mean, the UFC's not pushing trans ideology, are they? They're not putting, fake trans people in your kids' schools, are they? I mean, like, if they were still doing the gay pride stuff, if Bud was still doing the gay pride stuff after they did the trans can stuff, they didn't get the message. Sounds like to me, getting on board with UFC is the message. Message received loud and clear. Right? And I'm not trying to be snarky, because I'm really not, but it's like, at some point, you have to be intellectually honest. You got to be like, well, like, all right, I mean, I'm not a beer drinker personally. I don't drink alcohol. It's like, well, am I that really concerned about who sponsors UFC? I like UFC. I like Dana White. I like him as a business person. And it's like, okay, like, well, that seems on brand to me. That seems right on the money. Ding, ding, ding. Like, I'm for that. Like, good on you. It's what they're supposed to do. So now we're still not happy? Are we ever going to be happy? Are there people that are more invested in never being happy? Kind of like the NRA. Like the NRA just loves it when there's Democrats in office because they can sell more memberships and get people riled up and like rah, 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 and they don't ever fucking do anything. Is that what we're doing with Bud Light? We can try to put them out of business, bankrupt them. It looks like they were pretty close. I mean, they were certainly pretty bad. So we're just, are there people that just want to keep everybody riled up, or, now that they've changed direction, we can just leave them alone? Can we forgive them? Can we forgive anybody? Can we forgive ourselves? Can you admit you were wrong? Can we admit we were wrong? I don't know. Something to consider. So yeah, I'm kind of in a mood. And also, for those of you on the internet, stop making fun of Paris Hilton's giant Illuminati baby's head. So, she's got Paris Hilton's son has this giant noggin with this giant smart brain that's going to make billions or trillions of dollars when he gets older because of, how well, because of all their pedigree. And he's got this giant, look, we all knew kids. I was a kid that had, I got a big old birthmark on the back of my head and a flat spot. So stop making fun of. I just think it's funny. Paris Hilton's Illuminati baby. I'll put a link in the story I'll put a link in the show notes on the website for that. Now we're going to get the police blotter. You knew we were going to do this, and we got 3 good stories, and we're going to go ahead and toss this for the night. The first one is obviously the Maine shooting in Maine. The Army reservist guy, God, he was like a master sergeant. It's like, holy shit. Shooting a bunch of people, and a lot of times these shootings happen, something happens, whomever it is, different people are like, oh, I hope, people want him to be a certain demographic or not be a certain demographic or a certain creed or a certain whatever, or political persuasion or not, whatever, which I think is kind of ghoulish, but it is what it is. But this guy was involuntarily committed, I guess this summer or last summer. The police had gone to visit him because they had gotten complaints about him. And his fellow troopers at his reserve unit were even telling people on base, remove his access, change codes. He's definitely going to end up coming back here and shooting up the place. And it just reminds me of like whenever there's a big terrorist attack and the FBI comes out and they're like, yeah, well, he was on our radar. Great. What the fuck, why do we let crazy... Again, I know I used to beat this horse, and I'm not going to beat it tonight. We let crazy people run around, obviously crazy, until they catch a felony, until they commit a serious crime, and they end up on death row or in prison for the rest of their lives. It's not a gun problem. Everybody knew this dude was fucking nuts. Second story out of the police blotter comes from North Dakota, and this is a really sad story, and it's also an example of I'm from Virginia, West Virginia, so I can say it the way I'm about to say it. Hillbillies can't handle money. I know that's terrible, and I'm talking about my own family, so I'm not like don't at me on this one. So it's a terrible story. So there's a guy in North Dakota. Apparently he got scammed on the internet somehow and was led to believe that he is going to inherit $30 million. I don't know why somebody would do that or what the upside of this was, but this guy, he went so far that I think he went to an airport to pick up a lawyer that was flying in to either sign paperwork or do whatever they're going to do so he could get his $30 million inheritance. So this person and everyone that lives in his universe, they believed that they were going to inherit $30 million. Well, his longtime girlfriend, I guess they didn't have a good relationship, and she felt that she was entitled to some of this money. And they weren't married, but she's like, well, common law or something. So she, for some reason, she decides, well, she's going to poison him with a radiator fluid, and she's going to take the $30 million or something of the $30 million before he can break up with her, because he's obviously, since he's going to inherit $30 million, he's going to buy a Corvette and start fucking strippers at the local North Dakota, strip club or whatever she thought he was going to do. And so she murdered his ass. And then it turns out that none of this was real. All of it was a scam. And he's dead, and she's in prison, probably going to prison the rest of her life. Link of the story. Third one. The third story is out of the United Kingdom. UK gardener is found guilty of being the Somerset Gimp. Quote, I am not a Gimp. I do not even own a Gimp suit. I am not in a Gimp suit. And you're like, what in holy hell is this story? Let's find it here real quick. This is just hilarious. So apparently this guy's been running around this place called Somerset in the United Kingdom, and he apparently he was seen by, I don't know, he apparently jumped out at one woman, did something. He was in a second incident, he was seen writhing on the ground, and it's this full body like leather. Hunt had previously been arrested on suspicion of causing a public nuisance over a series of other Gimp, quote, Gimp incidents in the Claverham and Yatton areas last year. Many of those also saw a man rolling around the floor and making threatening noises towards people. He appeared in front of late at night, but police said insufficient evidence meant no further action was taken in relation to those offenses. So this guy, Joshua Hunt, 32, I'm looking at a picture of him right now. I'm going to try. I've seen a picture of this Gimp outfit. And I'm like, I have a confession, and I need you to actually help me out here. What is a Gimp exactly? I don't even know. So this wraps up episode 320 of the John1911 Podcast. If you want to see more stories or pictures or links, anything we discuss, except I'm not showing my Gimp outfit, please go to the website at john1911.com. That's JOHN1911.com. Remember, it's all about shooting guns and having fun. Everybody, have a good night.